Welcome everyone to the official program launch of our new Australian Children's Laureate, Sally Rippon. My name is My name is Kristen Durrell and I'm the Program Manager for the ACLF, the Australian Children's Laureate Foundation. Before we begin, and I'll just change that. No, wrong way. There we go. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay respects to their elders past and present. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands people are joining us from today out there. Now, I'm not going to waste your time. I am thrilled to present our Australian Children's Laureate for 2024 and 2025, Sally Rippon.
All right, so we've got a bit of a jam-packed event. Some of you in the room may not know that we're also streaming this live to thousands of children across the country. So this is going to be quite an unusual, fast-paced setup where I'm going to be talking to you in the front row. Hopefully in the back you'll get a lot out of this as well, but also talking to a lot of people out there. It's so wonderful that you could join us. So one of the exciting things about being asked to be the Children's Laureate is that I get to talk about the things that I'm passionate about. And obviously I love to make books, I love writing, I love drawing, and I also love working with some really creative, talented people. I travel around schools a lot, and one of the things that I really want students to know is that a lot of people are involved in making a book. And a lot of my childhood I spent making my own books, so stapling bits of paper together and scribbling stories in them and drawing little pictures in them as well. And I'm sure many of you have started this way, particularly in the front row, I'm thinking in particular. And so how do you take something that you just make and you just do for fun and make it into a book? Well, there's quite a process and quite a lot of people involved. So I thought what I'd do first of all is just show you sometimes how many times it takes to get a story right, because that's one of the other things that often kids will say to me is, oh, I'm not very good at writing or I'm not very good at drawing. And I say, well, even the best creative people still need several goes until they get something that is ready to be published. So I thought I'd take you through a little slideshow of some of the work that I did on one of my books and just show you what is some of the process that goes on when I'm coming up with a story. So let's have a look at what we've got here. That's my little slide in case you didn't recognise me. So coming up with a story, often the very first place to start is to come up with great characters. And you really want to know your characters well. And so I decided that I wanted to write a story about best friends. And then once you've created who your characters are, the next thing you can do to start making a story is think about what the problems are that they might need to overcome. So this was the very first little sketch I did of these two characters, and I knew that I wanted to create a witch because I loved stories about witches when I was young. I loved the magic. And then I thought, well, what could be a problem that I could give to a witch? And I thought, well, it would be a real problem if a witch struggled to read, because then when she was reading spells in her book, she might mess them up, and that would just create a disaster in the classroom. So I thought, all right, I've got my witch. This is exactly who she's going to be. I know what her big problem is. And then I thought, I'll give her a best friend. And I thought, I want her best friend to be very different to her, because that's going to be part of the problems that we're writing into this story, is that these two are best friends, but they live in a world where witches and monsters don't mix. So they have to keep their friendship a secret. And I thought, but her friend needs some problems as well. And I thought, maybe he doesn't fit in the world that he grew up in as well. So he is what you would call a feelings monster. And I can really relate to this. I have very big feelings. I don't know if anybody else in the room can relate to that. But when Buster gets happy, he gets bigger and lighter and floats up into the sky, changes colour. And when he's sad, he gets small and grey. But of course, if you're in the world of monsters, you can't let all the other tough monsters know that you have these big feelings. So Buster has to hide this from all his friends. So now I've got the idea of who my characters are and what the problems are that they have individually, and also the problems that they will face together. And that's pretty much how I start a story. And then the next thing that I will often do is do little sketches of my characters. So this was the very first sketch I did. Now, I think I did okay with the witch. I think witches are easy enough to draw. They look a lot like humans. This one has kind of scraggly hair and stripy black stockings. But I had a little bit more trouble with the monster. So the next thing I will often do is test it out on an audience, very much like yourselves. And I showed this picture to a group of young kids, and one little girl put her hand up and she said, I think he looks a bit like a hairy potato. And I was thinking, well, that's obviously not what I'm going for. So that was very, very good feedback. And so I went back to the drawing board. And this is just to give you an example of how long it can take to get something right. So the next drawing I did was this one, where I used a pen now and gave him a bit more detail, took it back to the same group, but the girl still said, still a bit hairy potato. So you can see this is now quite a lot of time has passed, and so I thought, all right, I need to make him look bigger and scarier and more like a monster. Maybe if I change the art materials I use, this will give you an idea of the mood that I want to create. So I did this next one of Buster, and this one we decided you probably wouldn't want to be best friends with. He just looks a bit weird, a bit creepy. And if he was hanging around my little witch, I'd be a little bit worried. So we decided he wasn't working either. So meanwhile, months and months now have gone past. I'm only showing you the end results, but there was lots of practice in between. So the next thing you can do if you're really stuck is to do some research. Obviously, I had my group that I was testing these drawings out on, but I thought I need to have a look at how other people have done monsters. So I had a look at lots of great monsters on the internet. Some of these will be familiar to you. I thought about how you make them look big and strong, but also kind of cute as well. And then, of course, I went to my all-time favourite book of monsters, and I thought, oh yes, Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. He really knows how to draw monsters. His monsters look big and strong and not afraid of anything, but at the same time, you could probably give these monsters a cuddle and you'd be okay. So this was all the work that I did just coming up with these characters, and you can see how much it changed over time. And even the writing of the story changed so many times before it became something that I was happy with. And this whole process is part of the journey of becoming a published author, that it isn't ever going to be your first work that's your best work. There's lots and lots of work that goes into it. But in the end, this was the last drawing that I did of Polly and Buster in charcoal. He's still a little bit bigger than he ended up being in the book. But when I got to this one, I just thought, yes, I've got them there, and this is right. So when kids come up to me now and they say, oh, I don't think I could write a story, you know, I'm not very good at drawing or not very good at writing, this is what I tell them, that you don't need to get it right the first time. Keep going, and eventually you'll get the work that you're happy with. Now, another really important part of creating children's books for me is to go back into my own experience, because really there's only two places that stories come from. They come from your imagination, and you saw there's a lot of my imagination in Polly and Buster, but they also come from my experience. So a lot of the stories I wrote about Billy B. Brown are really just me remembering what it was like to be a kid. And so when it came to illustrating the stories of Billy B. Brown, we decided we'd find another illustrator, because you saw how long it took me to get it right. Aki's a much, much faster drawer than me. And so Aki Fukuoka is a Japanese-born illustrator living in New Zealand. And we'd seen some of her work online, and we really loved it. We thought it was really beautiful. We sent her the story. And again, even though Aki is a professional illustrator, you can see how many drawings she had to do until she got Billy just right. She said she actually did over 100 drawings, and these are some of the sketches that she did ahead of time. Eventually, she came up with this version of Billy B. Brown, which, if you look very closely now at this picture of Aki, you might see where she got her ideas from. Now, none of us knew what Aki looked like until she came to Australia, and it was so much fun travelling into schools with her, because the kids would see her cross the courtyard and they'd call out, Billy, Billy, because they thought she really was Billy B. Brown. And Archie told us that when she did these drawings of Billy, her dad actually said, Archie, you're just drawing yourself. But I think there's actually a really important message in there, because lots of myself I put into my stories, and it wasn't until Archie put herself into the pictures that the pictures started to come alive. So that's the second tip I'll give to any young writers, is you need a lot of imagination, but you want to really be in your work yourself. Draw upon your own experiences. There are many other people that I've got ideas from, including my boys. So this is my youngest boy when he was very little, and he said, well, why does Billy get to tell the stories all the time? Why do we never get to hear from Jack? And I thought that was a very good point. So thanks to my youngest son, I also started writing stories from Jack's perspective. And there are many other people along the way who were involved in putting these books together. So Stephanie Spoutles was not only the designer of the Billy and the Jack series, and also the Polly and Buster series, but also the illustrator of the Jack series, which I don't know if many people know, so I just thought I'd give her a shout out today. Now, I want to give a quick slideshow shout out for some of my other collaborators who couldn't make it here today, but I just want us to acknowledge that not only these beautiful people that I'm going to have on stage with me in a moment, and I'll introduce you to Eliza in a second, but Lucinda Gifford is the beautiful illustrator of Big Dog, Little Dog. Daniel Gray Barnett, unfortunately, can't be here today because he's all the way over in Tasmania. But excitingly enough, we are happy to, I'm very, very happy to introduce the co-writer of this book, come over to my house. So Eliza Hull is sitting on my right. Can you give her a clap and I'll tell you a little bit about her. So Eliza and I have been friends for a long time, and one of the wonderful things about meeting Eliza is that I really got to understand another perspective of being in the world. So my youngest son really had a hard time at school because he's dyslexic, and school isn't always an easy place for people who find reading a bit of a challenge, which I'm going to talk to the adults a bit more about towards the end. But the world can sometimes not be the most accessible place for other people who are living with other types of disabilities. And there's a lot about what Eliza has taught me through our friendship and also through working on this book about how we can make this world a friendlier place for people who live with disabilities. So Eliza, can you tell me a little bit about when you were a little girl, what were some of the differences that you would have liked to see put in place for yourself? You used a wheelchair for a little while when you were young, and sometimes that didn't make going to school, for example, an easy place.
Yeah, so I have a disability that's called Charcot-Marie tooth. It doesn't have anything to do with my teeth. They are the 3 doctors that discovered my disability. And throughout school, it was very tricky, actually. So I had a lot of operations, surgery, which meant that I was in and out of hospital. And I sometimes would come to school on using crutches. Sometimes I'd come to school using a wheelchair. And sometimes I would come to school and walk. So that meant that every day was very different. I think the hardest part was not being able to get into certain classrooms if I was using a wheelchair. Even now I find it very difficult to get up and down stairs. So that was hard, but also PE, so doing sport. Often at that time, because I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, and disability was just not something that we really spoke about at school. And so often I would have to sit and watch all my friends run around and play sport, and I would be sitting there on a summer's day wondering, why can't I play? Why can't I be part of that? And so I think teachers maybe didn't really have that kind of education around ways to be more inclusive, but bit by bit we are starting to see that change, and that's why I think a book like Come Over to My House is so important.
Were there books around like Come Over My House when you were growing up? Did you see many children like yourself in books or on the television?
Not one. There was, yeah, I never saw myself, you know, even on TV or in films. I can't remember one book that had a child that was a wheelchair user or had a disability, and I think that can be really hard when you don't feel or see that representation. You feel quite alone in having a disability.
Definitely. And you do so many amazing things now. You're a musician, you've made films, you've done podcasts. Did you always want to write stories when you were young?
Absolutely. I would sit we have this little nook. I grew up in regional Victoria in Wodonga, and we had a little kind of study nook, and that would be where I would sit with the big Mac computers, the big colour bubble, and I would sit there and write books, often about friendships and relationships, and I wish that I kept those. I don't know where they've gone. But yeah, I definitely always wanted to write. And in fact, in my early journals, I said that I wanted to be a singer and a writer. So I always knew that stories was where I belonged. And it's just been so beautiful to work with somebody like you, Sally. So thank you.
Wonderful. What do you think is important about stories? I mean, in Come Over to My House, we get to meet, I'm just counting them, 7 different families. These are all based on people you know. What is it about these particular families that you wanted our readers to know?
I guess, I wanted to make sure that we had a real cross-section of diversity, so, in all of its ways. But I wanted to show that, somebody that was a wheelchair user might not always be a wheelchair user, that sometimes they might use a walking frame. I think that can sometimes be a bit of a misconception that a wheelchair user will always be a wheelchair user. I wanted to show that these families are really creative in the way that they live, and that they use technology or just ways to adapt in their homes. And I think I wanted to show them that they are just really like all families. They have fun, they play games, they sing songs, they dance. And I think Daniel was so great in showing that really colourful, vibrant family life, to show that having a disability is not something to be afraid of or scared or feared, that in fact it can really make a house fun and enjoyable to be part of.
Absolutely. Can you show us a couple of your favourite pages in the book? I love this book so much. It's very beautiful. And another really wonderful person we have here today, I wonder if we could just give her a round of applause, is Melissa, who's Auslan interpreting this talk. Can everybody just say hi to Melissa? Fantastic. And one of the exciting things that Eliza has agreed to do with us today is to, when we were touring this book, when it first came out, I think 2 years ago now, isn't it?
Almost.
Yeah, we, because Eliza's a singer, she came up with a song for it, and most importantly, came up with an Auslan interpretation of it, which we're going to teach you too, which is pretty cool.
I guess, looking at, it's very hard to choose your favourite family, isn't it? It's like choosing a favourite child. But I think we've both said how much we love, there's a particular illustration of a father who uses what's called a prosthetic attachment. He uses various prosthetics. He uses a knife to cook, a hammer to be able to build. He even builds an incredible skate ramp for his child. But he also uses a hook. And that is so that he can pick things up, because he has what's called limb difference, so he only has one arm. And I love this picture because when you look back at the way that stories have been portrayed in the past, often a hook has been something that is seen as scary or evil, like Captain Hook, somebody that is, I guess, the evil character. And I wanted to, I think Sally and I both spoke about how we wanted to show a father holding his family, hugging his family in a very gentle way, and that a hook is not something to be afraid of or something scary. It's just something that he uses to be able to pick up things and to also hug his family.
I like that picture too. Would you teach us the song?
Absolutely. So this song uses what Sally was saying was Auslan Sign Language, and that is the language that many people that are deaf or hard of hearing use. And so this particular song is called Come Over to My House, and it's just a little bit of a song that I wanted to sing with the children. So we'll show you it in a bit of a slow way so you can get a hang of it. So first of all, it goes, come over to my house, come over and play. Come over to my house, you can stay the whole day. Do you want to try and sing along?
Let's have another
Okay.
go. I'm going to sing it, so if I can do it, you can do it. All right. Yeah.
All right, let's all give it a go. Adults, everybody. You ready? So we'll do it one more time. Come over to my house. Come over and play. Come over to my house. You can stay the whole day.
I think let's do one more time.
One more?
Okay? Yeah.
It is
just
fun,
so you've
isn't
got
it?
it. And I hope everyone out there is practicing this in their classrooms too.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So it's come over to my house. Come over and play. Come over to my house. You can stay the whole day.
Do you know what I find so lovely about sign language is so much of it is explanatory. Like this is day. Isn't that beautiful from the morning to the evening? And the house, so much of it is easy to tell once you start learning a little bit. So, you know, I think it's something you and I have talked about doing for a long time.
Absolutely. It's definitely on. I want to do that this year. It's
You
on
know?
my little list of all the things I want to achieve.
So I think it's okay to tell people that we're working on another book together.
Yes.
Which should be coming out soon. And Daniel Gray Barnett, one of the reasons probably he's not able to be here today is he's very busy doing the pictures for it as we speak. So thank you so much, Eliza, for being a beautiful collaborator. You can see what a joy it is to get to work with such amazing people. And I have someone else to introduce you to very shortly. Can we give Eliza a big hand?
Thank you.
All right. Who likes monsters? Everybody likes monsters? Oh, there's that beautiful picture I meant to show you before. Now, the wonderful Chris Kennett is the illustrator of the School of Monsters series. Up you come. And Chris, you've always drawn a lot, but you came over from England, first of all. You grew up in England. Did you draw a lot when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah, I drew constantly. It was all I was interested in doing.
And did you make some of these drawings into books as well, like I used to, or did you do more
I love
comic
making
strips?
books. I love making comics. I read a lot of comics when I was young. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a comic creator.
You did, but you actually went into animation for quite a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of work you do when you're working on an animation?
Well, in the beginning, I actually was an animator, so I used to make other people's characters move and act and speak on screen. And then later on, I became a character designer, so I ended up making the characters that then went on to become the animations. So that was lots and lots of fun. Probably the most famous thing I worked on was The Day My Butt Went Psycho by Andy Griffiths. And I worked with lots of other illustrators on that too, Adele Gay Thomas and James Hart, both very famous illustrators as well. So animation is a really good breeding ground for potential illustrators.
And what's different about drawing pictures for an animation to drawing them in a book? How is it different for you?
There's lots of similarities, actually, because when you're creating characters for animation, sometimes you're posing them out into different expressions and different types of actions. And what they do is that actually gives the animators a clue on how these characters might move. If you were doing an octopus character, for example, you might draw some images of the octopus, you know, slurping along the ground or something like that, and that might just help explain or illustrate, funnily enough, what that character might do, how it might operate and move around.
And so I do get a lot of kids saying to me, I'd love to be able to illustrate books or do animations, but I'm not very good at drawing. What would you say to them?
I would say just keep on going. Yeah, because you're just like with writing and with your Polly and Buster illustrations, your first drawings aren't ever going to be the first things that end up appearing in the final product. And if you get frustrated and a little bit upset and want to give up, that's the moment where you've got to maybe take a step back and then come back to it at a later point.
And you brought along a book that you thought was kind of helpful, maybe
Well,
when you were young?
Yeah, so this was my actual book from when I was a kid. This was made in 1981, just give you some idea of my age. And I found this book, I don't know why I hung on to it really, because I found it really frustrating. It would have images like this, and there are also some internet memes a bit similar to this. How to draw a horse, for example. It's basically draw some rough lines and then draw a perfect horse. It's like they are the two, they're your two stages right there. And there's like a dog there. And there were lots of that. There was a little section on cartoons which I enjoyed. But yeah, so I found that frustrating, but also motivational too, in the sense that maybe I could teach other people to draw one day. Yeah.
Well, in the back of the School of Monsters books, you actually do that a little bit. You do take us through the drawings of every monster that's in the book. And I think you've been kind enough today to say that you wouldn't mind teaching us how to draw some monsters today.
I wouldn't mind doing that, yeah, absolutely.
And you brought some things along to do some drawing
I
with.
have, yes.
Yeah.
So our wonderful tech guys will be able to help me out.
So, some of you in the front row, I think you have pencils and paper, and maybe in your classrooms across Australia, you can grab a pencil and paper now. Any grown-ups that want to join, if you've got a pad in your handbag, good time to pull it out now.
I'm going to wear this special glove too.
Oh, tell us about the special glove.
The special glove means that I can, when I draw, I can glide effortlessly over the screen.
Are we going to be able to do
useful.
this if we don't have a special glove?
You don't need a special glove.
I think we'll be
unless
okay.
you're drawing on, I'm using my iPad today. So I do all of my illustrations digitally, which means I use computers to do all my illustrations. So all the School of Monsters, all the Crossbones books, the Nerd Herd books as well, all done using a computer. I usually use my big computer at home, but sometimes it's quite useful to have something like this at your disposal. But you don't need this. What I'd like to do, you don't have to do this, but when I'm drawing a character, I like to do a really rough scribble first, so you might be able to see. Oh, I might move down. I'll zoom
So
out
do you
so
want them
get
to be doing this bit yet? Or?
You can do this bit if you like, but very, very softly. Let's just draw a nice circle. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, like that.
Has everybody got pencils and paper? You're all good? Yep, I can see everyone drawing.
So this, and I'll do a little circle underneath like that. Basically, that's the very building blocks of any illustration that you might do, is keeping it really simple to begin with, and then you can build on top of that. It's like almost putting the character's skeleton down first. So I've got that, and I can zoom in nice and close here so you can get a better view. So within that big circle there, I'm going to draw 3 smaller circles.
Okay, so you got that. So you're doing a big circle, under that a little circle, and inside the big circle, we're going to do 3 smaller circles.
Yes, so I'll show you where they go. We'll do 1 here, and I'll try not to use the undo button, because you haven't got undo buttons, and I don't think that's very fair if I go and use mine. So there we go. We've got 1 circle, and then we're going to do 2 more circles.
It'll be interesting to know if anybody can recognise who this monster is you're drawing.
1, 2,
Which
3, and I'll
monster
zoom
has-
out a little bit so you can get a good sense there. So there we go. That's our start. Inside those, we're going to do 3 pupils like this.
3 eyes. So when you're inventing a monster, really, you can do just about anything, can't you? Just not hairy potatoes. That's
No
not
hairy
inventing,
potatoes, but the great thing about monsters is they can look like anything. You can put eyes on the top of their head, under their chin, you can have horns, you can have ears, all sorts of things. It's really up to you, and there are no rules with monsters, which I particularly like.
So fun.
So, let's give this character some eyebrows. I try to use really simple shapes with my drawings so that they're easy to redraw again and again. Okay, and then under those we're going to draw a little open mouth like that.
He's looking familiar to me now. I'm going to give you a clue. Have a look at the banner over there. There's 3 monsters on that banner. Only one of them has 3 eyes. That's a pretty good clue.
That's a great clue. Let's draw a little tongue in there and maybe some teeth on the top like that. So they're just curvy lines, really. Sometimes a lot of kids say, I can't draw, but I say, if you can write, then you can draw. Because a lot of these is like letter O's, lots of letter U's. So I try and use lots of like letters in my illustrations. Okay.
Is everybody up to speed?
Have we all got a
Good.
face?
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. We can still see that rough shape of the head, but above that, we're going to draw a circle and then 2 lines dropping down like that. So we'll do 2 of those, 1 on each side. I think he's coming together. Here's a great thing I like to do with this. You can actually rotate it around.
I think you can do that with paper.
You can do that with real
Yeah.
paper.
Amazing.
And sometimes that's a really good trick. Sometimes if you like tie yourself in knots trying to get the curve right, if you just turn the paper around, you can actually make life a lot easier for yourself. So there's the top of the head. And I'm going to turn him all the way around this way so I can continue. And let's draw a circle. Circles are really tricky, so I won't use the undo button. I would have used the undo button several times by now. I'd like to point that out to any illustrators in the room. Will probably be feeling my pain right now. So there's the head. It's a bit of a wonky head. If I was doing this for a real book, I would probably change a few things. But let's go with it, and we're going to add in some circly spots around here. And this character is called, does anybody know who this character is called? Yeah? Zap. That's correct. This is Zap.
We have some big fans in the front row down here, I know.
Excellent. So, whoops. Just move him into shot for you. There we go. So on the side of Zap's head, he's got these 2 little headphones, which is pretty useful in this image because Zap is actually using an audiobook, isn't he?
So what we wanted to show with Chris's beautiful illustrations in the banner, and that they're the pictures that we're using for the laureate this year, is that one of our little monsters listens to audiobooks, one of them reads books, and the other one uses Braille. So lots of different ways that you can access stories.
Okay, so there's Zap's rather large head.
Lots of brains.
This book was called Anyone Can Draw, and I kind of agree with that. But I would say, I would add a line to that, and I would say, anyone can draw, but everyone draws differently. So we're all capable of drawing, but everyone's just going to look slightly different to the other person's. And I think that's really, really common.
Good to know.
Okay, under that, Zap has a collar, so let's draw like a big looping little flat U, we can call that, and then we can add some lines down here like that. How are we going for time, Sally?
Yeah, we're good.
We're good for
Heaps
time?
of time.
Okay, now I can use that body, that one that I sketched up earlier, and I can just draw that around like that. And across the middle of his tummy, we'll add a belt and a buckle. There he is, he's all coming together. I think we're missing some crucial things. What are we missing? Anybody in the front row? Yeah? Legs.
Legs are pretty handy for getting around.
Great
even in moon
suggestion.
boots.
So let's do 2 lines coming down like that. And then we'll do a little boot coming down the bottom. So we can reverse that on the opposite side. 2 lines and a boot.
So Zap lives on another planet. Is this a special outfit that he needs to wear for his planetary travel?
Yeah, I think so. So when we were coming up with these characters, we knew that we wanted to have another flying character. And Zap didn't look like Zap right at the beginning, did he? He had bat wings, actually. And then Sally had the idea of making him maybe from another planet. I thought, that's a good idea. So then we could have rocket boots. So we've got these boots down here, and then you can have some fun. Just so Zap is always flying in all of the stories. He's often in the background, or if there's a bit of a hard area or there's blank space on one of the pages, I can just stick Zap up in the corner somewhere. So that's a really handy little characteristic he's got. Oh, I got rid of that. Okay, what else are we missing? Anybody else got any suggestions? Yeah? Arms, of course. I'm going to zoom in nice and close. Arms are easy, just 2 straight lines like that. And then we can close off the end and add a little extra line. That can be the cuff, the cuffs of his sleeves. And we can just do some sausage fingers like this. And we can repeat that on the opposite side as well. 2 lines, close the end, a cuff, and some fingers. Like that. And I think if we zoom out, there we can see our finished Zap.
How did you all go?
Is everyone
good? What do you reckon? So who's your favourite monster to draw, Chris? Do you have a favourite
my
one?
favourite monster. One of my favourite monsters is Jamie Lee. I don't know if we've got a picture of Jamie Lee, but Jamie Lee is a really small little character. She's one of the smallest ones, but often when we get, it's the same with Zap, if ever there's a little gap in one of the pages where we need to just fit a character in, I'll stick Jamie Lee, just stick her in the corner, or she could be peeping around someone's legs,
nice,
or something like that. So she's fun. I do like Jamie Lee.
Good.
Got a soft spot for her.
All right. I'm just wondering whether we've got time for another quick drawing, because we're about to bring up a very important person as well, because Chris and I, while I'm chatting to the audience, maybe you could do a little drawing of a monster just for us to watch how you do the drawing. Yeah?
Absolutely.
And while you're doing the monster, some of you might want to invent your own monsters as well, because we're about to bring a very important person up to stage in a little while, because it's all very well that Chris and I come up with the ideas for the stories. So in the School of Monsters, I draw the pictures. Sorry, that's you. You can take that credit, Chris. I write the stories, we come up with the characters together, and Chris draws the pictures. And like I showed you with my drawing, sometimes Chris had to do a few different drawings to come up with the one that we were happy with. But because we're not just making the book together, we also have to work very closely with our publishing house. And often when I'm travelling around the country meeting kids, they are quite confused about what a publisher does. So I thought this could be a really good opportunity to have a chat to my publisher and have a think about some of the work that goes on behind the scenes in putting a book together. So while I'm chatting with the publisher, you can do some more drawings if you want as well, or you might have some questions of this very special person. And here, Chris is just showing you how quickly he can do a hairy Sam. That is very beautiful.
So this would always be the first step of any illustration in a book. Something really rough and scribbly and scratchy. And the best thing about collaborating with Sally and with Marissa and Penny as well is I can send these really rough early sketches off right at the beginning of the process, and they can tell me straight away, okay, that's good, let's keep going in that direction. And I don't have to worry about drawing out the whole perfect finished illustration right at the beginning. There can be all these steps and stages along the way where we can just sort of figure things out, I guess.
Yeah, really important to do.
You might say...
sorry
to interrupt. You might say that, Sam's looking a little bit too excited here.
Is there such a thing?
Well, maybe it's an inappropriate expression for the tone or the mood of the story. Maybe something really sad's happened, and then in comes Sam, looking like that. That's not going to quite work,
true.
Is it? Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, it's good.
Okay, so I'll just finish this.
And then we will invite up our publisher. Amazing. So you can keep working on your drawings, but I would like us to give a very big clap to Chris Kennett for all his amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And invite the glorious Marissa Pintado on stage. Thank you, Chris. Here are some more of Chris's drawings. Look at the beautiful spread there. And you might be able to pick Chris. He's drawn himself in that one, running to get his bin out in time for the garbage truck. And there's all our School of Monsters so far. Marissa Pintado, this is a really nice opportunity for me to have you on stage with me, because a lot of the time when I'm talking to kids in schools, I will show them a handmade book I made as a child, which I couldn't find in time for today, unfortunately. But there's a big difference between the books that you make at home and the books that you bring out into the world. And there are a lot of things that are really important to think about, and a lot of people who work in the publishing house. So the name that we give for your role is the publisher, but there's a lot of other people involved as well. So can you tell us what you do as a publisher and what some of the other people in the publishing house do too?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, the job of the publisher is to read lots of stories and decide which ones would make really excellent books. So that means I wake up and I get on the train and I read stories all the way until I get to the office. And then I read stories all day for work. And then I go home on the train and I read some more stories.
That sounds terrible.
It's pretty hard. And then I give my kids dinner and I put them to bed. And then I sit on the couch and read some more stories. And it's pretty great. And I spend a lot of time thinking about which stories might make excellent books and who I might want to make those books with. But of course I can't do that by myself. I also work with an editorial team filled with wonderful people called editors who are obsessed with proper spelling, making sure that every word is exactly right, making sure that the shape of stories is right, making sure that an author's stories are the best they can be. And I also work with a designer from our design team, and they figure out how to make the outside of the book look like what it feels like to read the book on the inside. It's a very, very special skill. It's very hard to do. And the designer often comes up with the cover design. They often design up the pages. They work with the illustrator a lot of time, give them feedback on their drawings, and then they put the whole book together, the words, the pictures, they make it all look beautiful, and then they send it to our production team. And our production team are in charge of working with the printer to turn one version of that book into tens of thousands of copies of the book. And we all have to talk to each other all the time because there are lots of decisions to make throughout that process. So I think I have maybe the most fun job because my job is right at the very beginning, where I just get to read stories and fall in love with them. But I think there's lots of amazing things about every single one of those roles as well. We also have the sales team, and their job is literally to go around to bookshops and show booksellers our new books and see how many copies they'd like to have for their shelves. And then the marketing team are in charge of making sure everyone knows about those books so that they can go into their local bookshop or their local library and pick out a book for them to read.
So if I was a young writer out there and I was interested to publish a book, what would be some advice you would give me? I know when I was in about grade 3 is when I first started writing stories and drawing pictures to go with them. What would have been a good thing for me to know back then?
That's another good question. I definitely think practicing as much as you can, writing lots of stories, drawing lots of pictures if you want to illustrate as well. I also think finding as much time to read as you possibly can is very important. Don't tell your parents, but a good tip is to bring a torch to bed and read under your doona. When I was a kid, I also used to like to get out of the dishes by taking a book into the toilet and shutting the door, and I'd stay there for an hour, and that way you get out of dishes and you get to read a book as well. It's a good tip.
Nice.
So write as much as you can, read as much as you can, learn as much as you can about how to tell a good story, and then when you have your own ideas, you'll have a good sense of how to make those ideas into a whole story with characters and problems to solve, and a solution at the end to bring the story together.
And I think when I was young, I didn't really realise that so many people were involved in making a book. What do you think is, I think one of the things that often kids don't realise too is even how many books are printed just from one idea. And even something like one huge piece of paper will be cut up into several pieces of paper and bound together to make a book. What is the most fun thing about your job? And what is the least fun thing about your job, do you think?
I think my most fun thing is when an illustrator like Chris, for example, sends through the very, very, very rough sketches that you saw of Hairy Sam, for example, the very, very, very rough sketches of a book all together. And I can see how Sally's story actually looks once it's laid out into pages. Because sometimes the act of turning something from just a Word document into something that has a page turn can really change how the story feels. Some parts of the story might suddenly feel too quick or too slow. Sometimes you might realise, oh my goodness, there's a hole in this story. I don't know why X or Y might happen. And sometimes that happens in School of Monsters, where Chris has seen a little gap in a story that neither Sally or I realised was there and found a way to solve that problem through the illustrations. So I love that moment when I get a set of roughs and I get to see what the story's actually going to look like. And it's always better than what I had imagined.
Such an exciting thing. And I think a really nice message for kids working on books out there in your classrooms is that maybe you're more of a writer, or maybe you're more of an illustrator. Maybe you want to team up with people in your classroom to create a book together. Because certainly I find when I'm working with other people, that's where my best work happens. So we're going to take a little bit of a 15-minute break, and anybody who's watching online, you're welcome to come back in 15 minutes. It'll be the little bit more serious adult part of the day, so you're welcome to tune out if you want to. But can we please give all our guests, Marissa, Chris and Eliza, a huge round of applause. And another thank you to our Auslan interpreter, Melissa. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a short break.
Hello, everybody. If I can just have everyone's attention, if I could ask you to return to your seats. We will be back in about a minute and a half. Thank you very much. See you in a moment. We ready? Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to everyone here with us at the Wheeler Centre. And for everyone that's out there on the live stream as well, thank you for sticking by. And if you have just joined us on the live stream, welcome to the official program launch for our new Australian Children's Laureate, Sally Rippon. So I would like to start this big kid part to our proceedings by welcoming to the lectern the Australian Children's Laureate Chair, Bruce Ellis.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's not very often that I get referred to as a big kid, but I certainly am. I try to still maintain a little bit of kid. I keep telling myself that I'm still 25, but my body certainly disagrees most days. As Chris said, my name's Bruce Ellis. I'm the chair of the Australian Children's Laureate Foundation. And what we've seen from Sally this afternoon, or this morning and into this afternoon, it's a pretty hard act to follow, but I'll try and I'll give it my best shot because I've got some really important thank yous to make. But before I do that, I just wanted to add a personal reflection on Sally's theme that all kids can be readers. When my children were young, I used to occasionally help out at their primary school and listen to kids reading and listen to the ones that needed to read to someone to practice. And it always struck me that there were very different levels of readers in the room. That they were ones that some would read really, really fast and learn it and pick it up very fast, and sometimes move into the next level of their reading, even into the next year level very quickly. And others really seemed to struggle. And they would struggle with their golden words, they struggle with their ability to get off the books they really started the year with. As I've got older and learnt more about learning, reading and the differences between kids, it's clearer to me than ever that we need to give kids every opportunity to read and to learn to read and support them in any way possible. Some of you may have seen the recent report from the Grattan Institute called the Reading Guarantee, and it makes it clear that about 1/3 of our children, our school children, don't get the reading and the learning skills they need to master reading. Now, if you just think about that for a moment, they talk about out of a normal class size of 24 kids, there's 8 that can't read properly. And that's not just in primary school, that's going through into high school and beyond. And when that goes that far, then you only have to think where it might end up. It goes on to say that every child we failed to give those core skills to, they miss out on those opportunities. And Australia misses out on that opportunity too. It's not just the children, it's the whole country that misses out on it. The report estimates that for those children that don't get those core reading skills, the cost to Australia over their lifetime will be something like $40 billion. Now, if that keeps going, that's a loss to Australia that's enormous and won't ever be able to be got back. We all know that reading's a core life skill that opens the door to every other aspect of learning, and the financial cost really just is the tip of the iceberg. One of the studies that was referenced in the report talks about the fact that learning gaps are the result of differences in the students' opportunities to learn, not in the students themselves. Put simply, that means we need to adapt to the student and the reader rather than them adapting to us and having a one-size-fits-all approach. And I was just talking to Nicole from Storybox Library. Very clear that even with our own children, that we need to do different things for different children, even when they come from the same parents and they have the same reading throughout their growing up years. We have to do it differently. And with Sally's appointment, we hope that we can further highlight and move faster towards all kids being readers. Now, our ability to appoint Sally as our Children's Laureate for this term doesn't just happen, and there are a number of people and organisations I'd like to acknowledge today. Here at the Foundation, we say once a laureate, always a laureate, and we're very pleased to have in the room today Alison Lester and Gabrielle Wang, 2 of our former laureates. If you can just welcome them, please. Now, our organisation doesn't run without the generous support of our major funding partners and sponsors, and I'd like to call those out today. We're very pleased to have the support of Creative Australia, the Copyright Agency Cultural Fund, the Gourlay Charitable Trust, the Association of Independent Schools of Western Australia, the Deafness Foundation, whose funding's allowed us to have Melissa today with us as our Auslan interpreter, and allowed us to put one of Sally's books on our website as an Auslan interpreted book, and we hope to do more of that as we go through Sally's term. We also have Sally's support from Sally's publisher, Hardy Grant, Belinda Audiobooks, who we've got a fantastic partnership with through their Borrow Box library. And Sally's audiobook is live on our website as of last night, I'm told. I'm getting a nod, so I got that right. We've also got support from the Australian School Library Association, and we've got an exciting sponsorship and partnership arrangement that we're working on with them. Lend-Lease and Bendigo Bank, who we've partnered with to support putting books into new school libraries in new communities in Victoria, and we're hoping to expand that nationally as well. I think we've done 3 schools in the last 12 or 18 months. So they're schools that just wouldn't have those books in their libraries if we weren't able to partner with the likes of Lend-Lease and Bendigo Bank. And importantly, the Wheeler Centre. For a number of years, we've partnered on metro, regional, in-person and online events, and today, of course, we've got their support to be here for our fantastic launch. We've also got lots of amazing industry supporters and partners: the Australian Publishers Association, the Australian Library and Information Association, Book People, Dimmock's Children's Charities, Early Childhood Australia, Zart Art, who provided the bags for the kids today, the Primary English Teaching Association of Australia, and Book Links of Queensland. And we're also really excited to be developing a partnership with Vision Australia during Sally's term so that we can give more kids opportunities to read, particularly those with vision impairment. We're also always grateful for the support of the state and territory libraries, local libraries, educators, booksellers across Australia who spread the word about Sally's mission that all kids can be readers. A special thanks I need to make to Lee Burgomaster, who I've seen in the room. Lee provides unwavering support for us. She has previously worked with us. Lee, thank you for just doing anything we want when we want it, usually on a very unreasonable time frame. So I can't quite see you, I know you're there, but thank you very much. Anne James, one of our former board members, who's also put a lot of work into design work. Adrian Beck, who I saw earlier, and for the production on Sally's Laureate videos. Our foundation team, Justine and Chris, this doesn't happen without them. I just turn up most days and it all happens. And of course the board of fantastic volunteer members who bring a huge range of different skills. This foundation doesn't run without all of those people. We're just a small organisation that consistently punches above our weight. Despite what many people think, we're not government funded. We rely on grants and donations to do the valuable work that we do. The work we do is important, not just for today, but for tomorrow and beyond. Our laureates here for the children that were in the room earlier, the children that hopefully are still online on the live stream, and for the children of tomorrow. So I'd like to leave you with just a thought from Barack Obama when he said to us, "A brighter future is ours to write. Let's begin this new chapter together and let this work start right now." Thank you very much. Now, we do have a short video for Sally, or of Sally, so I'm going to let that run and I will just park myself behind the banner here.
Hi, I'm Sally Rippon. I'm an Australian children's author and I've just been named the Australian Children's Laureate for 2024 and 2025. This is an absolute career highlight for me. I've been writing for as long as I can remember, published my first book maybe 30 years ago and have over 100 books published since then. I'm also apparently Australia's highest selling female author, which is an incredible thing to think about. But I think probably the most exciting highlight of my career is to be named the Children's Laureate. I'm so excited. What I hope to do is to really promote the idea that there are so many ways to access stories. Obviously through reading, but there are audio versions, there are braille versions, and there are so many different ways to experience storytelling. And these are the things that I feel passionately about. So as a child, we moved around a lot because of my dad's work. So we spent a lot of time in hotel rooms, and my mum would give us books to read, and then when we'd finished reading all the books that we could carry, she'd give us pencils and paper and we'd make our own books. I think that's probably where I started as a children's author. So really, I think I've probably been a writer since I was about 6. So as a child, I'd been to 8 different schools. We grew up all throughout Southeast Asia and arrived in Melbourne at the beginning of year 8. So I finished my schooling and then once again started to travel. So finished studying in China, studied traditional Chinese painting, then came back again to Melbourne where my family was. Even within Melbourne, I found myself moving quite a lot, and most recently have lived in Castlemaine for a while. Now I find myself in North Fitzroy and I love wandering through the Edinburgh Gardens with my dog Billy, who is so patient and has followed me all around Melbourne every time I move house. And he's always the first one to help me unpack my boxes. So thanks, Billy. The first book I had published was a book called Speak Chinese Fang Fang. The initial idea of the book came from a handmade book that I made for a Chinese Australian student I was tutoring. And I showed it to a publisher and she loved it. She loved the idea. So she worked with me to help me make it into a proper book. And I was lucky enough that that particular book won the CBCA Crichton Award of the Year. And that opened up a whole lot of doors for me as an illustrator, which is really how I started in publishing. So I guess even though I mainly write now, I think it was illustration that got me into working in kids' books. And it was a really lovely way to start. Once I'd been writing for a while and I had quite a few books out there, mainly books I'd illustrated, I started to really focus on the kind of books I wanted to write going into the future. And at the same time, my youngest son was really struggling to learn to read. So I looked at the kind of language that was being used in school readers and I thought if I could only come up with really fascinating stories but with that type of language, potentially that would be enough to hook him in. And eventually Billy B. Brown is the series that came out of that. I think Billy's quite relatable. There were a lot of books around at the time she was first published for little girls about princesses and fairies, and I certainly wasn't like that when I was a little girl. So I think a lot of young readers have really appreciated to see a strong, dynamic character. And her best friend Jack is quite sweet and quite sensitive, and I think that's important to show that boys can be that way too. I think a lot of kids can see themselves in Billy and Jack, and that's just such a thrill for me. After writing the Billy and Jack stories, I decided I wanted to write something for an older readership, a more complex story set in an imaginary world. So I came up with two characters, they're best friends. There's Polly the witch, and she finds reading a struggle, which means that she messes up her spells. Luckily, she lives next door to Buster, who is a feelings monster, but he has to hide his feelings because, of course, monsters have to be tough and brave and not afraid of anything. So once I'd written the stories, I did think about having another illustrator on board, but I hadn't actually illustrated anything for a long time. So I thought, no, actually, I think I want to do the characters in this book. One of the loveliest things about being a writer is that I get to work with so many amazing people. So this is in publishing, in marketing, even in the bookstores and the librarians. All of these people work to make sure my books get into the hands of kids. Probably the most exciting part, I would have to say, is seeing my words become alive through the work of an illustrator. So the Billy B. Brown series is illustrated by Aki Fukuoka, and she lives all the way over in New Zealand, but we still have developed a very close relationship. And then Stephanie Spartles illustrated the Hey Jack books. The Big Dog, Little Dog is with Lucinda Gifford, and she does this most beautiful, colourful scenes of the dogs playing together. And another book I've had the chance to work very closely with my collaborator was my co-author, Eliza Hull, and we worked on a book called Come Over to My House, which is illustrated by Daniel Gray Barnett, who lives in Tasmania. Eliza lives in Castlemaine, and we met and we became very good friends when I had a place up there. Eliza lives with a disability, and she showed me how we can make the world much easier for people who live with different types of disabilities.
You know, in Australia alone, 20% of the population have a disability, and yet we just haven't seen representation like this, where we get to meet lots and lots of families that have either a child or both a child and a parent with a disability.
And these are the types of books that we're writing together to introduce readers to seeing the world in a different way, to looking at it in a way that we can make it more accessible for everybody. The School of Monsters series is my newest series, and I'm super excited about it. I love working with Chris Kennett. He's a great illustrator, and we just have so much fun putting these books together. And I see the series as a bridge between a picture book that you would read aloud to a child and potentially the school reader that they will be working on with their teacher at school. So there's a whole lot of little monsters out there. There are more to come, and I think they have been a really good support for lots of young readers around the world now. It's such an honour to be asked to be the Australian Children's Laureate. The Laureate has a long history, and we've had so many incredible people over the last few years act in this position. The Laureate's job is to represent Australian children's literature here in Australia, but also internationally. I think my particular mission as the Laureate is to really remind people that we can access stories in many different ways. So reading is an obvious one, and reading is something that I've always been able to take for granted, I've always found easy, but won't be the case for everybody. So for people who may find reading a struggle, there are many ways we can access stories. So we can access audiobooks, some children might read with Braille, some children might prefer oral storytelling, and there are many ways that we can present stories, whether it's through a long, complex novel or through comic books. These are all valid ways to tell stories, and I think it's what I really hope from my 2 years is to open up the idea of how we can all access and share our stories.
Now I'd like to invite Sally back up to the stage.
This is the serious part. All right, so I was asked to provide a bit of a mission statement, and so I actually echo quite a lot of the things that you said, so thank you very much for beginning with that introduction. Thank you all for being here. It's very exciting and slightly daunting, and so this part I have written out in case I forget anything important. So as you can see, my mission is all kids can be readers. And some of you may have heard the news last week from the Grattan report, and that their research found that 1 in 3 children can't read proficiently. A third of all of our children are finishing primary school without the literacy skills they will need for life. On their website, it goes on to explain that students who struggle with reading are more likely to fall behind their classmates, become disruptive, or drop out of school. They are more likely to end up unemployed or in poorly paid jobs. It also says that a key cause of Australia's reading problem is decades of disagreement about how to teach reading. The whole language approach, which became popular in the 1970s and is based on the idea that learning to read is an easy, natural, unconscious process, does not work and should be banished from schools. Instead, all schools should use structured literacy approach, which includes a focus on phonics in the early years. I'm hopeful that with the publication of this latest Grattan report, along with all the articles that have circulated as a result, things might finally be changing. Now, it goes without saying that I'm neither a teacher nor a literacy expert, but I am a parent, and having brought up a son who struggled to learn to read, I have seen firsthand how damaging it can be to a child's self-esteem and mental health to go through school without strong reading skills. I was one of the many parents who were led to believe that if I just read to my child from birth and surrounded him with enough books, he would eventually pick up reading by himself. Unfortunately, this is a damaging myth. Damaging not just to the child who is not being explicitly taught vital skills they will need for life, and as a result may grow up feeling deficient, but also to the parent who believes if they had just done better, paid more attention, read to their child more, perhaps things would have turned out differently. This is a terrible burden to place on parents, and one I carried for years, even throughout the research and writing of my book, Wild Things, How We Learn to Read, and What Can Happen If We Don't. As a children's author, all I could think of to help my son when it was clear he was struggling to progress in reading was to write the kind of books I thought he'd want to read. He had plateaued in grade 3, which is quite common for children with learning difficulties, and had started saying things like, "I hate school, I hate books, and I hate reading." I thought if I just wrote books with simple vocabulary and sentence structure, but with engaging characters and storylines, this would give him enough incentive to want to learn to read, and eventually he'd become a reader, like his 2 older brothers. But I couldn't have been more wrong. An article published on the ABC website last weekend quotes findings from an international study that examined 10,000 pieces of research going back to 1966 to find the best practices supported by evidence. The article warns, structured literacy has at its core the idea that reading is easy and requires 2 to 3 years of explicit teaching in the classroom. Whole language, the belief that reading is something we will absorb by osmosis, posits that reading is easy and natural, which evidence has increasingly shown is not the case. It goes on to say that before seeking a diagnosis, find out if the school is using explicit systematic phonics instruction. And if this is the case, and if other interventions haven't worked, that's when it may be time to look into the possibility of your child having specific learning difficulties. In all the research I ended up doing to write Wild Things, which is essentially the book I needed when my son first started school, and my gift to parents who are just starting out on this journey, I discovered so many things I wish I had known sooner, which the Grattan report has written up as a part of their reading guarantee. You can find it online, but essentially it boils down to best practice instruction, literacy specialists in every school, and universal screening when children start school, and again when they go into Year 7, to catch anyone who may have fallen through the cracks. My son did fall through the cracks and eventually dropped out of school, not because he's dyslexic, but because he was identified much too late for truly effective intervention. I now know that even dyslexics can be taught to read proficiently, provided they are given enough instruction and the correct instruction. Ideally, in the best case scenario, we want our children to be given explicit reading instruction within the first 3 years of their schooling, because after grade 3, they are no longer expected to learn to read, but to read to learn. It is also unfair for teachers in the latter part of primary school, and even more so in high school, to be expected to help students catch up on this vital skill. We need to get better at identifying children who might need early intervention or extra support as soon as possible. Otherwise, as I learned through watching my son's struggles during his high school years, the outcome can be devastating. My hope as the Children's Laureate is to shine a light on some of these areas and help create more understanding around learning difficulties, as well as neurodivergency in the classroom. Over the next 2 years, as I travel the country, the top 3 things I will be focusing on are 1, the importance of early intervention and identification, 2, the importance of advocacy and accommodations in the classroom for neurodivergent children and those with learning difficulties, and 3, understanding and appreciating the strengths of neurodivergency as well as the challenges. Having written books over the last 20 years to engage our most struggling readers, I like to hope I have gained the trust of educators as well as parents. It's easy for me to understand the frustrations of parents wanting better support for their neurodivergent children, but I also have many friends who are teachers and have spent a lot of time in classrooms as an author and see the frustrations and often unrealistic expectations put upon our educators. Therefore, I like to hope by having a foot in both camps, I can perhaps help frustrated parties see both sides and of each other's perspectives. I'm also keen during my term as laureate to broaden out our ideas around the way we share stories. Like my son, there will always be some kids who fall through the gaps and others who may find reading a challenge for other reasons. Sadly, I have seen firsthand how society too often judges people's intelligence on their literacy skills. If I were to joke with you about how terrible I am at maths or physics, no one would think lesser of me. But if I say I'm bad at reading or spelling, immediately people make assumptions about my intelligence, which is a terrible thing and can mean that many people with reading difficulties grow up with enormous damage to their self-esteem. I would really love for kids who struggle with reading not to feel shamed or lesser, and for the adults around them to ensure they still have access to great stories in whatever form they can be shared, and for all kids to see themselves represented in the stories we share. Sharing stories is how we develop empathy and begin to understand someone who might have a different life experience to ours, and I believe we need those connections now more than ever. Fortunately, for people who may struggle to read, these days there are so many ways to access stories, from audiobooks to Braille, blog posts to TikToks. My son, who is almost 21 now, and I'm happy to report a fine young man in the world, loves Japanese anime and has recently become better at reading through reading subtitles. All reading is reading, whether a child chooses comics, cookbooks, or catalogues. Recently, I was asked in an interview which of the characters in my children's books would I see as most personifying my mission as the Children's Laureate, which I thought was a great question. I would say most of my characters feel like outsiders or struggle to find their place in the world. But Polly the witch, who struggles to read, and her friend Buster, the feelings monster, who has difficulty regulating his emotions, probably sum up the themes I explore in my writing the most. These 2 characters find it hard to feel empowered and useful within their everyday environment, but once they leave their confines, they quickly discover that what once seen as weaknesses translate to strengths. This is exactly what I discovered when I was interviewing neurodivergent adults for my book, that once they left school and discovered what they were good at, they would often thrive. However, many of them still carried emotional scars long into their adult lives. I believe we have the imagination to do better for our children. As the Children's Laureate, I will be travelling extensively, visiting every state around the country at least once over the 2 years. I will be talking with lots of children, of course, but I also hope to talk with lots of adults, parents, teachers, and change makers. Because what I have found after meeting thousands of kids in schools, libraries, and bookstores all around the world is that the kids are perfect just as they are. It's the world around them that needs to change. I believe this is happening, and it's starting from the bottom up. Not long ago, my sister told me a story about her 10-year-old sons who had started at a new school. She met them at the gate and met one of their new friends who had a strong stutter. As they were walking home, my sister asked her boys, "Does he ever get teased for his stutter?" Her sons looked at her with genuine shock. "Oh, no, Mum," they said earnestly. "He's in the cool group. All kids who are different are in the cool group." This makes me very hopeful for our future, where to be different is cool. Our kids are okay. As adults, my hope is that we can all learn to better support our neurodivergent kids so that they too can thrive, and this starts with building a culture that celebrates difference. As the Grattan report identified, all kids can be readers, provided they're given the correct support. As many of my advocate friends in this audience will tell you, We have all had the research and evidence for years now. Now we just need the commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. There's not much more to say, really. I would like to share a quick message from our Australian Children's Laureate Foundation patron, Noni Hazelhurst, who wasn't able to make it to join us in person today. She said, "My apologies for not being with you in person, but I am definitely with you in spirit. What a masterstroke and an absolute triumph to appoint Sally Rippon as our new laureate. The bar couldn't be set much higher, and the timing of Sally's appointment couldn't be better. Her unique experiences as a writer, mother and educator have enabled her to develop a special rapport with children and their individual needs, and her books and her sales reflect that perfectly. Sally truly understands the power and gift of reading and the terrible lifelong disadvantage for children who fall through the cracks at school or at home. It's never been more important to empower children and stimulate their imaginations by giving them access to literature and opening their hearts and minds to other possibilities. It is vital that people like Sally are willing to step forward and undertake this huge task. I wish you well, Sally, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your willingness to spread the word." So thank you, Noni. Now, Sally, it is time to officially launch your laureate term with a very special presentation. Bruce, would you like to do the honours? So while Bruce comes up, some of you may already know, but I would like to give a special shout out to Andre and Catherine Van Niekerk from Feathers of Australia. Every laureate term, Andre and Catherine handcraft a laureate statue for our laureates. They're all unique, and they gift this to our laureate in support of the work that they do. So a huge shout out to Andre and Catherine from Feathers of Australia for once again providing us a beautiful laureate magpie, and the wonderful Anne James who scripts the plaque for our laureates, and for Lee, again, another shout out to Lee Burgemeester for helping put it all together for us as well. So, so with that, Sally, I would like to declare Sally's Laureate program for 2024 and 2025 officially underway. So come over here. Oh, you've got, yes. Sally and I have been working together, some of you may not realise, for about 6 months already, and we have some wonderful events planned. The first one will be at Storyfest, Somerset Storyfest, where Sally's doing a presentation to kids, up to about 800 kids, and also a talk at the inaugural Dan's Children's Book Awards, which is the Diversity in Australia and New Zealand Children's Book Awards, which is also supported by ASLA. So that's going to be really exciting. And you'll also be at the State Library soon and travelling all over Australia. So, Sally, I know you've got a couple of thank yous. I do too, but I'll jump back in after you. So you come and say your thank yous. Yep.
All right. So you might double up on some of these, but I just want to do special thanks to Beck Kavanagh, Xanthi O'Connor and the Wheeler Centre. Adrian Beck, who's left, for his friendship and support and all the lovely things. To my family and friends who supported me all of the way, some of whom are here today and others watching on live stream. My new family and gorgeous fiancé. Everyone at Hardy Grant Children's Publishing, who are the best publishing team I could have hoped for. And I'd love to give a special shout out to my gorgeous publisher and friend Marissa Pintado, who we met earlier. Special thanks indeed to my beautiful collaborators, and I feel so lucky to work with them. Can we also give Eliza and Chris another big thanks? Huge thanks to my new and fabulous personal assistant, Jennifer Keane. I've waited my whole life to say personal assistant, who is like my outside brain and makes me think I can actually do this and get some writing done. So thank you, Jen, wherever you are. And last but definitely not least, an extra special thanks to the whole ACLF team, with a special shout out to, come around here, the Wonder Woman herself, Kristen Darrell, who put all of this together and will be shepherding me around the country over the next 2 years. I couldn't have hoped for better support. Thank you, Chris. You're amazing.
Yes, she did take all my thank yous, which is good because it's time to go and have some tea and coffee for those in the room and to say farewell to our live stream guests. But before I do, thank you everybody for joining us here at the Wheeler Centre. Thank you so much to everyone out there in virtual land watching our live stream. We do really appreciate your support and we couldn't do this work without you. We do have a website, childrenslaureate.org.au, where you can find a lot more about us, about Sally's mission. You can watch the videos, you can see the resources as we put them up through the course of the 2 years. And don't forget to sign up to our newsletter as well, because we've got lots and lots of exciting things coming your way. So thank you everyone for your support of the Laureate program and the ACLF. One final thank you, a very special thank you to Melissa, our wonderful Auslan interpreter, who is an absolute trooper when we throw lots of things at her that she didn't expect. So thank you. There are some light refreshments available for those in the room up the back, and feel free to mingle. And our wonderful Chris, Eliza and Sally are going to be also signing books. Plus we have some special new Laureate caps, and you can get a free reading light if you grab one today, if you'd like, to have a look up there. There are books for sale, and our lovely authors and illustrator will be there to sign them. So thank you everyone. Please enjoy and mingle. Thank you.